you spend so much of your time in school, it's miserable if you don't enjoy it. A lot of people, when they go to traditional school, it really doesn't suit them, but they end up thinking there's something wrong with them. And they carry this and they don't do well in school. They can't learn math, or they have trouble learning how to read, or they're just unhappy being there. I have a friend who's a very successful marketing executive in Silicon Valley, and he would ditch school and go to the movies because it was too boring for him. There's all different ways in which traditional school doesn't really suit people's learning. But what happens is that many people end up thinking that there's something wrong with them, and they carry this into adulthood. It's just a sad situation, that waste of human potential, right? And they carry it into adulthood, and they may never figure out that it was something wrong with the way they were taught.
Hello and welcome to Along the Way Life's Journey. I'm your host, Carl Buccellato. As I've told you many times, I've had the great pleasure of traveling millions of miles around this beautiful earth of ours. And I've had the occasion to meet wonderful people, many, many of them with great stories and great inspirational statements to make that I know will inspire you and bring you up, if that counts, to do something more with yourself. I have such a lady here today, a magnificent lady. Her name is Marsha Familaro Enright, and she is a teacher and author, and she is currently considering herself an educational entrepreneur because she's involved in developing a brand new college and a new way of approaching education. So, Marsha, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here around Thanksgiving week. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. So, educational entrepreneur, that has to do with your new position in Reliance College. Is that correct?
Yes, but it also has to do with the fact that I founded a Montessori elementary school back in 1990.
Ah, that's quite something.
And I ran that for 27 years. And then I started a summer program for high school and college students in 2009. And now it's led into this work on the college.
Well, that's great. So tell us a little bit about the college and how it's different. Firstly, let me say thank you for starting this kind of a college, because
Thank you.
I'm one of those old dinosaurs that believes education should teach people things and expand their minds and get them to be bigger, broader people than when they went in there, not lesser little. Anyway, I won't get into that. But thank you for that.
There's a lot we could get into
yes,
about
sure.
what's going on today.
So tell us about what you're doing with the college. I did have the occasion, I told you offline, to watch 60 Minutes the other night, and they were talking about Austin University and how it has approached a new way of education as well. And it's been quite successful for a few years. And I think that's the approach that you're taking also. So tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy to see the establishment of new colleges and universities, because for years, people who believe in free societies, in reason, in ethics, in freedom, in individualism, they have tried to get into the universities and the colleges across the country, and they've established centers and all kinds of things. But the way that things are set up, the progressive leaning faculty has kept them out. And I could see decades ago what was going on with the colleges, where they were going. And I thought a long time ago we should start some new institutions. So I was very fortunate that I started a summer program. So long story short, I started a Montessori elementary school in 1990 for my children because I wanted the best education possible. And I thought that was it. And I wanted to also make sure that it stayed very true to the Montessori method, because it can, depending on who's running the program, it can veer from it. And it was very successful. We had so many students. My own children did very well. We had so many students over the years whose parents would tell me, my child loves school so much that when he's sick, he lies to me so he won't miss school.
That's kind of a reverse, isn't it?
Right.
You must have been doing something right.
Right. And it's an entirely different approach to education than traditional education. It's very concerned about the individual development. What does a person need depending on where their state is in their development and the kind of learning that works best with them. So I imbibed all this philosophy of Montessori and how it worked, and I brought it up to the high school college level in a program that I started in 2009 for the summer. And I put everything I knew about optimal education into it, and also making sure that the students were learning how to reason well, how they learned how to write well, that they learned, read great books, the classics, the people that have really influenced the way the world is right now. This is why it's important to read the great books or the classics, because their ideas influence us everywhere, even though we don't know it. And we may not know it. And made sure that the students would be learning about, the Constitution and the Declaration, about Tocqueville's analysis of the U.S., things like that. And so I put everything I knew into this program. And from the first year, I was even surprised at the outcome, because by the end of 1 week, I would get about 75% of the students saying to me, I feel like my life has been transformed because now I can judge anything myself. And I have so much more confidence. And that was our aim, was to nurture these young people to knowing how to have a good judgment, how to look at things objectively, how to interact with each other well, how to be knowledgeable, but have the confidence to go forward and be independent in what they were doing. So that's the basis.
Now, folks, I don't want to cut her short over here, but I want to say something. If you're like me, you're sitting back there and you're saying, wow, I love this idea. I have a grandchild. I have a child. I want to know more about this. All of her information will be in the footnotes. You'll know just where to contact her. You'll know just where to ask for information on how you can enroll students. You'll know all about that stuff. So don't bother writing it down. It'll all be in the footnotes. Back to you. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Carl.
To interrupt.
Thank you. No, thank you. Yeah. So we've been running this program for 15 years, and recently we've been interviewing the initial alumni, the first people who went to the program, and they're telling us how they still use what they learned in the program and what they're doing today. I mean, one of them is a materials engineer in an aerospace company, and he said that 1 week of our program was worth a semester in college.
Well,
not for all the knowledge, but for what you learned about how to think and how to read really well, how to interact with other people. And so I have many alumni now telling me that how it's carried on in their lives since then.
Well, sure. You have 15 years now from the original group. So you must be seeing the fruits of your labor and that how they have developed as human beings and as citizens, and how they're contributing to the country and to the world, and how they're raising their own families and what they're doing with their own children at this point. So that's quite a criteria. Yeah.
They're generally wonderful people. I mean, it's very much like what happens with students who go to Montessori school. They end up being just really unusually wonderful people because they've been in an environment that was so nurturing to them for what they exactly needed, and to develop them into great human beings. That was Maria Montessori's aim from the beginning.
Okay, so I'm remiss here. Let me say this, because you're telling us all about your life's work, and obvious your dedication and your passion for it is so obvious to me. What brought Marsha to the point where this became your passion? What brought you to this point in life where you said, I have to, I have to do this. Who was Marsha as a little girl?
Okay, I just want to finish up real quick and then we can go back to it. So that program, so a few years ago, we received a very large donation, which enabled me to start working towards actually opening a college. And so the summer program has always been a compressed version of what we're going to do in Reliance College. We're hoping to nurture the active minority that's going to move us back to a freer country. That's our aim in the long run.
And by minority, you mean intellectually, not racially.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Well, what got me here, when I loved school, I loved to learn, and but I saw a lot of children around me who were very goofing around, not happy, getting in trouble. And I thought to myself, I don't want my own children to have that experience in school. I want them to really love learning, because if you think about it, if anybody knows little children, it's almost impossible to stop a 2-year-old from learning.
Absolutely.
Right? You have to really beat them to stop them. But what happens by the time they're 8 or 9 and they don't like to go to school? So something's wrong there. It goes back to, Aristotle said that human beings love to know, they want to learn. But what happens when they're in school? What happens is that they're not getting the learning in the way that's appropriate for their development and their psychological, social, intellectual needs. And so I was kind of had my eye out from the time I was a little girl about what kind of educational program would be really good and keep that love of learning. And when I came across some articles about the Montessori method when I was about 20, I said, "Oh, this sounds really good." And I went and educated myself. I read all of her books and educated myself and visited Montessori schools. And then I put my son, my first child, into a classic Montessori preschool, and it was great. And then, long story short, there was a need. There wasn't an elementary program that was in Montessori in our area. And so I turned to some other people that I had met along the way. A Montessori teacher I had met in the preschool, other parents. And I said, what about if we start our own school? And we found, initially we were in a Montessori elementary that was in a local suburb, and they had to close. We were trying to get them to move over to our neighborhood, and they didn't want to. So I said, what about if we start our own? And so I got a group of women together, and we started this Council Oak Montessori School in 1990. And it was initially an elementary school. Oh, thanks.
Courageous.
Well, it had to be done, right?
Yeah.
I wanted my children to have as good of an education as possible. So I wanted them to enjoy. You spend so much of your time in school, it's miserable if you don't enjoy it, right? And, something I was talking to a friend about the other day, a lot of people, when they go to traditional school, it really doesn't suit them. And it really doesn't suit them, but they end up thinking there's something wrong with them. And they carry this, and they don't do well in school. Or they can't learn math, or they have trouble learning how to read, or they're just unhappy being there. I have a friend who's a very successful marketing executive in Silicon Valley, and he would ditch school and go to the movies because it was too boring for him. So, there's all different ways in which traditional school doesn't really suit people's learning. But what happens is that many people end up thinking that there's something wrong with them, and they carry this into adulthood. Right? Exactly. Yeah. Right. And they carry it into adult. It's just a sad situation, that waste of human potential, right? And they carry it into adulthood, and they may never figure out that it was something wrong with the way they were taught, So anyway, so that's how I got interested in Montessori and in Montessori education, and ended up, and I could see how fabulous it was. I mean, children in a well-run Montessori school, you walk into the classroom, they're very happy. I don't know, the viewers might not know, but it's organized a completely different way. There's all these materials on the shelf that are like games that teach all the ideas that you want it, whether it's mathematical, whether it's historical or literature. They're all around the room. The students are each working on their own work individually, or they can work with other people if they want to, but they don't have to. They're on chairs, they're on tables, they're on floors, all kinds of comfortable places for them. Working intensely, they tend to be very focused. They talk to each other. Montessori said, why do we make children be silent in school when we learn so much from each other at work when we're adults? So they'll talk to each other, and you can tell when you go into a well-run Montessori classroom, they're just happy. There's this happiness there.
And that sounds like the blueprint and the foundation that they stole later on to create Silicon Valley with all the young geniuses that got things done without the confines of people saying you have to sit in that chair, you got to do this way, you got to. Completely different mindset.
Well, funny that you say that. Turns out any number of them went to Montessori schools.
I'm sure they did.
There's even a book by a researcher at MIT called The Geek Way by Andrew McAfee. And in it, he points out how so many Bezos, the Google founders, I can't even remember, Anne Frank, Julia Child. I mean, so many highly creative people went to Montessori school. And he makes an argument for why this why this was important, because it allowed them to keep their love of learning, their curiosity, and their creativity.
Yeah, and I never went to Montessori school, but I know people who did and had children in there who did. And to me, I always saw that as, kind of the foundation for experiential learning, where you put hands on and you get involved and you do things, turn that knob a little bit this way rather than that way and see what happens. It's a very interesting approach.
To me, one of the most amazing parts of the curriculum is the math curriculum, because all of the concepts that you want to teach children in math are concretized in materials that they're using. So a little 3-year-old can work on these materials using beads and do arithmetic problems in the thousands, because it's in a form they can work with.
Yeah.
They're not ready to just see the abstract numeral, but they and students who come out of a Montessori program, they understand math in a deep way, because they see how it's represented in the world, what it is in the world. So that's how I got interested in education, and I could see children being so happy in it, and that's why I became dedicated to keeping the school going and then bringing it up to the high school, college level.
Okay, so in Reliance College, what is the size of the class, or how many students are participated at a time? Because this is, I can imagine, it's something that could be done on a small scale or on a larger scale, individually approached. But what are you experiencing at the moment?
So Reliance College's program is a combination of a specially designed and very rigorous liberal arts program. Now, a lot of people have a negative idea about liberal arts because of the way that it's been distorted today. But originally, the term liberal arts comes from the fact that it means the education for a free man, because liberal is the same
freedom
root as liberty, right?
Yeah.
And but we have we have a special program in that, and then the students will be doing one part of their year will be working on a very their own entrepreneurial project, figuring out a problem in an area of professional interest, trying to come up with a solution, and then being connected with mentors. And remind me what your question was again. There was a reason why I went in until that before I was answering your question.
The size and scope of the individual classes
Right. So to maximally help the students, first of all, they absolutely need work in person, because you need, when you're developing, you need to know how to interact with other people, because you're going to do that the rest of your life. There's going to be so many situations, whether it's professional or personal, where you have to interact with other people. So you need a lot of work in that. So it's going to be in person. It's going to be, on the one hand, an all required curriculum in some respects, and then a very individualized curriculum in other respects. We'll have classes that are about, at the most, at any one time would be about 17 students in a discussion, because if you have more than that, we can't run we use a special form of what's called a Socratic seminar that's fantastic for helping students develop their ability to read deeply, to reason about what they're reading, to talk to other people about it, to really listen to what the other person is saying and respond to it. Instead of sitting in a discussion, just thinking about what you're going to say next. And those are fabulous skills for working, because,
Certainly.
When you're working on a team, you have to listen to other people, right?
They're great skills for working and for learning. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're planning to start small. We're aiming for like initial class of 50, and with, 3 groups in Socratic seminars at any one time, and then build up from there. So we want to get everything to be working really well and build up from there. And I'm sure, because of the way the learning works, I'm sure that academically they're going to do very well. We'll end up getting quite a good reputation academically.
Oh, that's great. So, ladies and gentlemen,
get at what you want?
Yes, thank you. We have a few reels that we will insert into the program as we go along. We won't break up the conversation now, but there are a few reels that Marsha has sent to us uh, with some of her students involved in some of these discussions and the seminars and how they react to it and their thoughts about it. So you'll be seeing them as you go through this show and we go further and further through it. But we won't break up the conversation at this time to show them. So
Okay.
I'm very, really intrigued with this because I think I told you that for some year, well, when my children, who are now grandparents themselves, when my children were in university, I got involved with it. I ended up being deeply involved with the university, St. Thomas University in Miami. And I was a presidential advisor for a while, and I was on the board of trustees for a while. And we got very involved with generating funds for the need of the university and various programs and so forth. And I'm sure you need money now in your startup times, and I'm sure that that money would be essential in the development of the college as you go forward. And we're going to give you a chance to chat about why you need the money now, and then we'll put some contact information where people can contact you and hopefully get in a dialogue with you or one of your representatives to see how they could help. You know, it could be a scholarship, could be an endowment gift, could be, you know, estate planning, it could be any one of those things. So tell us what the current agenda is and what you're trying to do.
Thank you very much, Carl, for giving me the opportunity to explain. So we're going to start small, and because we're not departmentalized the way our program works, we don't need as much money as you might imagine. So we need to raise $2 million in order to open, and $5 million the first year, and then as we grow, you know, it'll be 10, 15, more after that. So right now we're in the stage, we've got about half of it raised to open. So we're looking to raise another $1 million or so. And I wanted to mention too, going back to the nature of the program, one of the things that's different about our program than many other programs there's a number of universities and colleges around the U.S. that are interested in making sure that students learn the values of freedom and reasoning and all that, is we're very focused on what de Tocqueville called the art of being free. In other words, not only what they need to learn, but how to teach them in a way that they can develop their own independent powers. And we kind of have a 360 view of this, because there's many aspects to the way that things are taught that convey authority rather than responsibility and independence to the student. So going back to your question about raising the money, I'm in contact with foundations and individuals. I'm talking to people around the country and trying to show them the great value that we're able to offer. I know that when people become autonomous, which is one of our aims, autonomous, self-reliant, confident in themselves, they don't want to be ruled. And this is like one of the fundamental motives for people to want a free society. So if you can combine that, if you can really nurture their autonomy, and we're really focused on that, how to do that, and convey the knowledge that they need to be confident about why a free society is the superior way to live, you're going to develop a minority, whether it's just a small group of people, because people will say, well, it's just a small school. How much difference can you make? Well, just look at Tiananmen Square or the founders of the United States or any,
or the 12 apostles, there were only
right,
12 of them originally.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. They make all the difference.
I keep saying I'm so happy to hear this, because I've been recognizing that this nation has been falling further and further behind in education of the youth, and falling further and further behind in how we teach people at the university level, because the progressive movement over the last 100 years has completely distorted what the values of America are. And, as you know, 99% of the faculty and the leading bodies in Harvard and Yale and Princeton and all those Ivy League colleges, who you entrust your children to and you entrust the future of the country to, are in terrible hands. These people they're not pro-America at all. And so we have to have not a backlash necessarily, but a recourse to it. We have to have a supplement to it that could say, okay, you don't have to send your kids to that kind of a place. You can send them to a place where they can learn to be proud individuals, proud Americans, to take risk, to grow, and to make this a better world for ourselves. And that's what you're doing.
Right. And where merit and hard work are the ultimate values. Merit,
Absolutely.
hard work, truth,
Absolutely.
objectivity, reasoning, respect for other people and their rights, all those things.
Completely agree with all of that. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, thanks.
So, I attended a online program with a common friend of ours, Robert, yesterday. He was doing a program on communications. He said, the persuasive communicator. And he said, you must include ethos, logos, and pathos in order to be an effective communicator. And I thought to myself, and I agree with that, but I thought to myself, basically that's what you're doing. You're teaching young students to think in terms of ethos, logos, and pathos, how to use the mind, the ability to think and act, and the emotions of what we are as human beings, to come beyond the herd factor and be something more, be something much more. I think that's wonderful. I really do.
It's so interesting when I've done these summer programs to see what happens to the feelings of the students over the week, because they usually come at the beginning of the week. They're kind of anxious. They don't know each other. They're not sure. They're used to classes where people are sitting there telling them what the answers, what they should think out of what they're reading, having some discussion. And the way we run the program, we're there as the guides to help them figure out for themselves what the author is saying. But we teach them the tools about how to do that. And you can see this self-confidence blossoming over the week and this happiness that blossoms. And what's interesting is, because the conversations are so good between the students, they start learning, oh, this other person thinks about this reading a different way than I do. Gee, that's maybe a good strategy to use. They start developing a bigger toolbox of reasoning approaches. And it's interesting. One of the alumni said to me, what happens is you learn how the other person's mind thinks in these discussions. And then afterwards, you talk to them in an informal way and learn about them personally. So you end up knowing these people better than almost anybody else you know. And what you see, and when he said that to me, it dawned on me why by the end of the week, they form this cohesive group where they're very happy to be together, and you can see they're super supportive of each other.
And they probably carry it on for years, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, they tend to be friends with each other for years afterward.
I'm an old dinosaur, years ago I taught, when I was in business, I taught a couple of courses for different things, for SCORE, but the one that I was most involved with was the American Management Association. And I taught a program called the Young Presidents, where I would take young men who became presidents in a group and work with them for a period of time and teach them and expose them to how to think and what others were thinking and why and so forth. And invariably, I'd look out there and I'd see them and I'd watch them, and I knew that's an aha moment. He got it.
Yeah.
Aha!
Right.
It broke through. Aha! And that's what you're accomplishing. That's what
you can see
doing.
in their faces. Yeah, you can see in their faces. I know it's interesting. So, and for sure, one of the things we're doing is they do not have to be afraid of expressing their opinions, because most students nowadays, I'm so glad that what's going on in the universities is finally coming to the public's attention, because this has been going on for decades and gotten worse and worse and worse. And you've got all these wealthy people supporting these schools that are basically undermining the very country that enables them to be wealthy, right? So, and I get quite worried because I see parents spend a lot of money sending their kids to these top schools, and then the kids come home radicalized, with terrible ideas.
Right. And it's a shame when you think that these elitists who are running all of this, these one world elitist people, what their real belief and thoughts are about we the people. They don't think we're worthy of a thought. They think we have to be led and shepherded around like sheep because we don't have the capacity to run our own minds and our own thoughts. And
exactly.
I think that's been all too long the philosophy at the universities, and it's time for it to stop. It's time for them to realize that the people really have a major ability to change and motivate. And just look at the history of this country and what we've done in the face of history, who we have become.
Yeah.
Can't take that away from us. Never can take that away from us.
It's such a shame because we've always been a country. Well, Tocqueville says that the people who came over, the Pilgrims, were unusual immigrants in that they weren't adventurers. They weren't seeking wealth. They came over for an idea, and they came over with their families, and they came from a highly educated class. And so they had the whole dedication to learning was part of that culture, and that filtered down into the whole U.S. So we have so one of the reasons why our higher education system has been admired by the whole world is the fact that we have so many different colleges and universities. We have like over 5,000. And the reason we have that is because anybody with an idea that, we should teach this or we should teach it that way, they opened their own college, right? In the free market before the government got involved. We had more colleges in Ohio than the whole of Europe in 1830.
Didn't know that. Amazing.
It's amazing.
Bit of information.
Amazing, right?
Yes,
yeah.
It is. Amazing.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to get back to was one of the things that happens to students when they go to college is they learn that they better not express their opinions if it's different than what the professor is saying, because they will get in. Not only will they be humiliated or looked at negatively, but their grades might even be impacted.
Yes.
And
Very
and
likely.
very likely. Yeah, that's what. So you find these young people they come to my program and they're kind of afraid of saying what they really think in the beginning, but then they see after a while, no, you say what you think, you give your reasons, you give your evidence for it, and we discuss it, as civil human beings. And we really try to understand what you have to say. It's very freeing to be able to do that.
How relieving to know that you're treating them like American citizens, rather than peons that have to be huddled and shuttled away. That's a wonderful thought. And I hope they get that picture. I hope I'm sure they do in your environment. I would love them to get that message around universally through the country that they are the future of this country, and how they think is important and what they do is important. And to stifle it for I called myself a dinosaur before, and I am. For me to stifle the thought of a young mind who is experiencing things I may never think of, regardless of my years of experience, what a terrible waste that would be. Terrible shame. Right. Terrible shame. I know when I was a young buck, you couldn't stop me. If somebody said that can't be done, I'd go prove it can be done. But
Exactly.
I've been a warrior all my life. What can I say?
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. But there's a lot of people who are easily squashed, and by somebody coming back at them. And it's a terrible shame. It's a whole waste. It's a waste of talent. It's a waste of human value,
Absolutely. I believe that God put each of us a unique capability. I don't know what it is. For some, it's one thing. For others, it's another thing. But I know we each have a unique capability and gift. And to squash it rather than to nurture it and water it and let it bloom, what a waste of God's gifts. That's a terrible waste of God's gifts.
It's sickening. Yeah.
It is. It
it's
really
sickening.
is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a couple minutes left. We're down to 35 minutes here. So we're going to show a few of your clips in a moment, but we'll do that offline later. So is there anything you'd like to close and say to the people out there, or rouse them up and tell them, come in and encourage us. Come tell these kids how great it is. What would you like to say?
Come and see what we're doing. Please stop supporting the traditional universities. Be very careful when you send your child to a college. Find out what's going on, what program to put them in, and see what we're doing. I'd love people to contact me. Please feel free to contact me. Talk to them about their own children or what they're looking for, or if they're young people themselves looking for something. I'd be happy to talk to them. We have some great people working with us, and my alumni would be happy to talk to you also. So
that's great. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see all her information. You're going to know where to contact her. You're going to have your questions, I'm sure. Don't be shy. Contact them. Ask out the questions. Support this effort because I think it's very worthwhile. I think it's a beginning of a movement in this country that we have to encourage and support and see more and more such places like this, because there are thousands and thousands, as Marsha just said, of the alternative. They're not all that bad, but many of them are. And we don't want to waste our next generation in bad ones. So we want to encourage people like this to open the kinds of universities and colleges that can bring apart real Americans with opportunities and futures and free thought. So this is our show today. Thank you so much for being with us. I do appreciate it. And again, I repeat, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. I hope it's a blessed one for you. We are going to, and my family, we're going to have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm looking forward to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my story. Go ahead. Please do.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really appreciate you having me on and letting me talk to your audience about what we're doing and why it's so important. It's really valuable to me. I'm very grateful for that. And it's great that it's just before Thanksgiving.
Well, let me say this to you. I feel humbled that you're here on this show, because if I didn't, once I heard what you're doing, if I didn't encourage it and bring it forward for others to see, shame on me. I have a platform. You should be able to use these platforms. The world should know that there's change underway, that people like yourself are taking risk and being courageous and coming forward for the good of our children, for the good of our future. So I thank you very much for being here. I really do. It's not just idle words. I mean it. Thank you for all that you're doing. And ladies and gentlemen, I know that you know this is my story. This is what I do once every week. And I know that you have your story. And no one can tell your story like you can. So I encourage you. Tell your story. Tell it, write it down. Tell it to your loved ones, your friends, your family. Write it and send it to the newspaper, the local television news categories. Tell your story. Because when it's too late, it's too late. And all that wisdom is lost. We cannot allow wisdom to be lost. It's too precious. And I tell you one more thing that I tell you all the time. What do I know? I'm this blustery guy from Brooklyn. I don't know much, but I know this. Get somebody you know today, give them a big bear hug. Tell them you love them. Tell them you love them. It may be the only time they hear those words. Encourage them. Tell them you love them. And I'm quite sure God does also. So you know what I'm doing now, Marsha. I love you. Happy Thanksgiving.
I love you too. You too.
God bless. God bless you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.